All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, after the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA's draft lottery last night, it did more than raise some eyebrows as the Mavs entered this process with a 1.8% chance of getting the first overall pick. But now Dallas has themselves a clear path to select basketball phenom Cooper Flagg first overall next month. Now, one would say, was the Mavericks getting the first pick just luck, or was it all about payback by the NBA after the highly questionable Luka Doncic trade several months ago? I'll let you be the judge of that. But nonetheless, you look at this NBA draft lottery system. Okay, it was implemented 40 years ago as a way to dissuade teams from tanking and losing on purpose in order to obtain a higher pick. Now, the first draft lottery was in 1985, and it was not without controversy as the Indiana Pacers entered with the best chance to get the first pick, but then that honor would go to the New York Knicks, who would select Patrick Ewing. And since then, there have been other instances as to where some people questioned the credibility of the draft lottery process. In 1993, we saw the Orlando Magic get the first pick the year after they got the first overall pick. And in 92, of course, it resulted in them taking Shaquille O'Neal. And to give you an idea, in 1993, Orlando went 41 and 41. They were actually tied with Indiana for the final spot in the East. They lost on a tiebreaker. They had about a 1.5% chance of winning the draft lottery. They got it. They drafted Chris Webber. Of course, Chris Webber was traded draft night to the Golden State Warriors for Penny Hardaway. You think about the Chicago Bulls in 2008 having less than a 2% chance to get the first overall pick. And then coincidentally, the Bulls won the lottery. They got the first overall pick, and they took the hometown kid from the Windy City, one Derrick Rose. So more often than not, don't get me wrong, we do see a team who was one of the NBA's worst, maybe not the worst, but one of their worst, uh, get that top pick. But in each of the last 2 years, the team that has gotten the first overall pick had a 3% chance or less of winning the draft lottery. Of course, last year, the first overall pick went to the Atlanta Hawks, and Atlanta had exactly a 3% chance of getting that pick. But I'll ask anybody out there, did anybody really see Dallas getting the first overall pick last night? Because I sure as heck didn't. The kid, what's going on, man? You saying what's up, 300? I heard about some of the drafts being, especially with Patrick Ewing or being rigged, especially with Patrick Ewing. He also got the number 33 jersey, which is a symbolic number. I'll tell you like this, and I'm happy, that you posed the question, you posed the statement that you did, because it's something that I was going to get to. The NBA, at the end of the day, they could say whatever the heck they want to. It's a business. It's a business like everything else. And the NBA wants certain players on certain teams in certain cities. Okay. And you go back to the first draft lottery in 85. David Stern, I feel like, made a business decision. Okay, New York was coming off of just losing Bernard King to that horrific knee injury. They needed a star. And, Patrick Ewing, I'm not going to say he was a generational talent in that aspect, but Patrick Ewing was a bad dude coming out of Georgetown. Okay, it really wasn't much that he couldn't do from the center position. Okay, and David Stern made it his business for the most part to get his stars in the big cities. And I'll tell you like this: if it's not a situation where stars are in big cities, if they go to smaller markets, it's usually because the NBA is looking to grow that market. Again, Shaq going to Orlando in 1992, the Magic getting the first overall pick the following year, and you look at how the popularity of the Orlando Magic exploded after that. They were an expansion team. Okay, you look at the Charlotte Hornets. They got the first overall pick in '91, another expansion team who came in with Orlando, and of course they got Larry Johnson, and that helped build their foundation. I truly think the NBA manipulates the draft process. I mean, you go back from 2011 to 2014, and this is when LeBron left Cleveland the first time around to go to Miami. In those 4 years that LeBron was in Miami, Cleveland got the first overall pick 3 times. Okay, and I'll tell you like this, I questioned it then and I'll question it right now. Some people might agree with me, some people might not. It's all good. I think it made it a little bit easier, in my opinion, for LeBron to go back there to Cleveland, after Miami in 2014 because the Cavs were indeed stockpiling picks. Like I said before, is the NBA on the up and up on the draft? I don't think so. Because, like I said before, their business, it's entertainment. They want certain players in certain cities on certain teams. Okay. It's a star driven league. And I think more than any other, it is truly a star driven league. And unless, somebody maybe like a Dan Gilbert who raises a stink about it, or if they're looking to build up a market in a certain place, certain players are going to end up in certain spots, especially the big cities. But aside from Dallas getting the first overall pick last night, let's talk about the fact that the three worst teams from this past season in the NBA, the Utah Jazz, the Washington Wizards, and the Charlotte Hornets, are not picking top three. Charlotte is fourth, Utah's fifth, and Washington is sixth. And I know that this is set up to be a very deep draft. This has been a draft that people have been talking about since last year. Okay, but with all of that said, three of your worst teams, none of them are even in the top three. And you're looking at Washington. Washington won 18 games. Utah won 17 games. Charlotte won 19 games. Okay. And not one of them even has a top three pick. For me, I'll ask the question: has the draft lottery run its course? I truly think so. I truly do. Some people will say, the draft, they have to put this out there to dissuade teams from tanking. I absolutely understand that, but at the same time, I'm like, if you feel like a team is tanking, you got to go out there and hold that team accountable. You look at the National Football League. I know that the NFL season is not as long as the NBA season, but some people have thrown around the words, for teams sometimes as far as tanking in the NFL. I don't think it happens because more often than not, if you are a bad team in the NFL, a lot of those guys that are on your team from previous year ain't going to be there next season. Okay, and they're playing for contracts. So it's one of those where a high round pick really isn't going to be beneficial to what you're doing. And still on top of that, there's tape of you giving a half behind effort. So it's one of those where I think if you want to keep the draft lottery process around in the NBA, you definitely have to have some tweaks. But in my opinion, it ain't working. You're saying I think that's why they push like the Kansas City Chiefs and the Royals even back then. Um, I never even thought about the Chiefs. Listen, it's one of those where I think with the NFL in comparison to the NBA, I think it's easier to get, to not focus on the big market agenda so much because, fans are always going to be there stateside. And the NFL, part of their foundation, has been some of the smaller market teams, a la, the Green Bay Packers. All right. And, you have a situation with Kansas City. Kansas City is immensely popular right now, but overall, the NFL is immensely popular. And unlike, the NBA, you never have a situation where you're questioning, excuse me, NFL players about giving their full effort. They're always maximizing out there. You hear about and you see it, from guys taking quote unquote nights off in the NBA, not giving a full effort. So I think it's one of those where they definitely, push the markets more, in my opinion, not to go off on a tangent, nonetheless. But in the NFL, I think it is more structure and than it is in the National Basketball Association right now. I think, like I said, they should just get away and do away uh, with the uh, with the draft lottery because okay, at some point you figured Utah, Washington, or Charlotte was going to come away with this pick, and if they didn't, they one of them would be top three. None of them are even in the top three. And another question for me, before I take this a little bit further, you look at the San Antonio Spurs. They were 34 and 48. Okay. So they had the eighth best odds coming into last night as far as getting the first overall pick. And San Antonio, in my opinion, at the very least, was going to be a play-in team before the Wimbiana injury, and then of course the De'Aaron Fox injury. Now the Spurs, who went 34 and 30 and 48, had the eighth best odds. San Antonio is picking number two. And if you're the Spurs, you're in the catbird seat. Why? Because you're not going to get Cooper Flagg. We know that. But you still having the opportunity, if you want, to draft arguably the second best player in this draft, put him alongside Victor Wimbiana. They're more than likely going to re-sign De'Aaron Fox. Or you can flip that pick around and trade that pick for an established player. We've got to wait and see. So these are things, that you have to wonder about when it comes to chicanery, if you will, because again, three worst teams are not picking top three. And then, the rich just keep on getting richer, at the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid was out for most of the year. I think his best days are in the rearview mirror. That's a whole nother story for another day. No real contributions from Paul George. Expectations were high for Philly. They won 24 games. They're picking third again. You're asking me, did I hear MJ is going to NBC soon? He's probably going to speak his mind and what he thinks about the NBA today. Absolutely. I truly do. Um, I'll say this. I really don't buy in to all of these, MJ versus LeBron versus MJ comparisons first and foremost, because I think they're foolish. Okay. And I think they're media driven and, people, buy into it. And I think it's stupid. That's just my opinion because they're two different players. But nonetheless, some people might not want to hear it, but Michael Jordan is an old school guy. Michael Jordan had a phenomenal work ethic, which is why, some people think he is arguably the greatest player who has ever played in the NBA. Nonetheless, Michael Jordan is going to tell it like it is. I truly do think so. Okay. And he worked hard and he expected his teammates to work hard. And you don't see that all the time from today's players. You see it from some. I'm not going to sit up here and throw everybody under the bus, but nonetheless, MJ is going to, I really do think, is going to tell it like it is. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how things work out now for the Dallas Mavericks. You have Nico Harrison, who people wanted to run him out of town. I mean, you just go back a couple of months, at the shock of the Luka Doncic trade, and everybody was like, "What?" And Dallas had to fight, scrap, and claw to get into the play-in. They did. It was a spirited effort, of course. No Kyrie, Anthony Davis, gave it everything that he had, and they were home. And I think what helped Nico Harrison somewhat is the fact that the Lakers were sent home in round number one. Of course, on Luca's way out of the door in Dallas, Nico Harrison threw it out there and questioned Luka Doncic's conditioning, and I think that showed up in the Lakers' first round loss, which gave, in my opinion, Nico Harrison somewhat of a leg to stand on. And now you've got something to build upon because the Mavericks front office, the Mavericks management is not what it was when Mark Cuban was there. Okay. So you're gonna get the first overall pick in Cooper Flag, but great seeds still they have a problem, growing and growing properly in bad soil. So if that front office thing is not set up and not fixed and not sorted out for the Dallas Mavericks, I think it's going to hinder one Cooper Flag. But nonetheless, Nico Harrison is definitely sitting in the catbird seat right now. I'll tell you this about Adam Silver. He's a puppet master, okay? And he learned from one of the greats in David Stern because David Stern knew how to manipulate certain things. He knew how to manipulate certain situations for the betterment and the growth of his league. And I think Adam Silver is doing the same thing right now. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's a surprise. And I don't think anybody we're surprised, but we really shouldn't be surprised that Dallas got the first overall pick after the whole Luka Doncic, controversy. Dallas is a big market, okay, and again, like I said before, you need your stars in your big market. That's the way that the NBA is looking at this. So some people, myself included, feel like the NBA's draft lottery has run its course, but I'm here to tell you it ain't changing anytime soon because this is all that's going to happen. If there is an owner or if there's a front office that puts up enough stink about why their team missed out on getting a top five pick, why their organization missed out on getting a top three pick, why their organization missed out on getting the first overall pick. Guess what? I guarantee you, before you can blink an eye, that franchise is going to get the first pick. Like I said, Dan Gilbert put up a huge stink. A, when LeBron left town first time around, and B, that was right in the heart of the lockout. And of course, we saw that Chris Paul to the Lakers trade get nixed. And Dan Gilbert was a big part of that. Chris Paul ended up with the Clippers. And before you blinked, Cleveland got the first overall pick 3 out of 4 years. We saw the Minnesota Timberwolves once upon a time put up a stink about not getting the first overall pick in the NBA draft, in spite of the fact that the Timberwolves had one of, if not the worst, winning percentage in NBA history. And since 2015, the Timberwolves have gotten the first overall pick twice, first with Karl Anthony Towns, and then most recently with Anthony Edwards. And of course, if you wanted to throw Andrew Wiggins into that mix, Wiggins, of course, was that last first overall pick by the Cavs during that 4 year stretch. Cleveland immediately traded him to Minnesota for Kevin Love. You're asking why do you think that the competitiveness of the NBA All Star Game and NFL Pro Bowl died down nowadays? It's not like it was before. I'll tell you why. The money. And it's not about the money that they're getting for the game. It's the fact that, especially in the NFL, I think these guys more than ever are worried about getting injured. And at the end of the day, a lot of people say this when it comes to sports. When you worry about getting hurt, that's when real injuries occur. I think NBA wise, I just think the guaranteed money has, really dissuaded guys from playing hard. And you just look at the regular season in the NBA. Guys really don't play hard, in the NBA. Not everybody does, at least. They clearly we have seen the intensity go up to another level here in the postseason. But nonetheless, if guys don't play hard when they're getting game checks during the regular season, what makes you think they're going to play hard in the All Star game? Once upon a time, the All Star game was competitive. They joked around, yes, for about a half of basketball, but in that second half, they got serious. Okay, right now we don't have that. They're like guys don't have the competitive edge, if you will, during the regular season. So it's hard to expect them to go out there and have that competitive edge during an exhibition game. But nonetheless, I think that the draft lottery is here to stay, even though it is a flawed system. And like I said, somebody would just put up a stink in order to go out there and get their way. So for all of those people out there that were mad at Nico Harrison, for all of those people out there that might have burned the Luka Doncic jersey or kept his Luka's Mavericks jersey, guess what? You got to make room in your closet now for a Cooper Flag jersey because I guarantee you, he like barring something unforeseen, he is going to be a Dallas Maverick in about 6 weeks. The NBA and of course the Dallas franchise, they're going to market the heck out of him. Let's see what the San Antonio Spurs do with that second overall pick. Like I said, this is a very deep draft. And of course, if you're Charlotte, Utah, and Washington, because of that, hopefully you could find yourself a quality player. I'm also going to say this because just because you get the first overall pick uh, doesn't is not going to result in success for your franchise because we have seen teams have the first overall pick, pick the wrong guy, or not go out there and know what they're doing. Sometimes it's better to have the second overall pick or third overall pick because the teams in front of you clearly don't know what they're doing. So franchises like Charlotte and Washington who have gotten it wrong more than they have gotten it right. Okay, it would have been nice, of course, for them to say we have the first overall pick. Charlotte's picking fourth. Washington is picking sixth. Uh, can you really hold your breath and expect them to go out there and make the right basketball decision? I'm really not sure. But nonetheless, one thing we do know for sure, Cooper Flagg is going to the Dallas Mavericks. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. Of course, they're expected to get Kyrie Irving back at some point next season from the knee injury. He does have a player option for more than $43 million for next season. I think he exercises that. Nobody's going to give Kyrie a big contract at 33 years of age coming off of a knee injury. Would Dallas trade Anthony Davis to try to get back more assets? That's going to be interesting to see right there. AD, when he's locked in, he's locked in. But of course, the biggest thing with Anthony Davis throughout his illustrious career, he can't stay healthy. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Dallas Mavericks work this thing. But nonetheless, I do think Flag is going to be the future for them. So let's see how things work out and lead up to the NBA's draft next month. I think there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking around the league with veteran contracts and picks, especially with that additional luxury tax apron. A lot of big franchises don't want to pay that. And, that's a big bill. I can understand why. But nonetheless, a lot of controversy. A lot of people are talking about it today. But nonetheless, Cooper Flag is going to be a Dallas Maverick, barring something unforeseen. We just got to deal with it. And people like myself and others will continue to question the process of the NBA's draft lottery. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and what you saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. That also goes for Instagram, as you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. You give me that follow, I'll give you that follow right back. Also, check us out on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites on social media. The Kid, as always, appreciate you chiming in, appreciate the commentary, and I appreciate the support. And until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again